Ahlan wa sahlan. Hello, guten Tag, hamjambo, and bonjour. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the 10th anniversary celebration of the SANAD Fund for MSME. We would particularly like to welcome those of you who join us from the BMZ and the EU, as well as the members of our board of directors, Dr. Daniela Beckmann, Stefan Seeb, Frauke Höckstra, Andrea Hagmann, and Babette Stein von Kamienski. Thank you also to those of you who join us from our partner financial institutions. We welcome you all and each. My name is Jacob Oli Nestigen. I'm a manager at Finance in Motion, the fund advisor, and your moderator for the event. We join you from TechQuartier, a fintech accelerator in Frankfurt, Germany, and a partner of the SANAD Fund on more than one occasion. As you'll hear today, and many of you know, the name for SANAD in Arabic means support. 10 years ago, likely in a well-appointed conference room in the KfW Development Bank, the papers were signed for creating the SANAD Fund for MSME. No sooner than that had been done, the Arab Spring began in the region. And since then, the SANAD Fund has proven its name to be well appointed. It has worked and formed partnerships across the region, and it quickly formed partnerships in Egypt and Lebanon, in the Palestinian territories, and Jordan, and in Tunisia. With the mission to partner with financial institutions to finance micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, the SANAD Fund has created strong partnerships across the region and created a great deal of impact over the years. And today, the theme of our event will be exactly that, impact, and the ability of the fund over the years to supply it. Today, 10 years later, we've gathered to look back at the SANAD Fund's accomplishments and its potential and future. We will have a number of greetings from key players in the fund and stakeholders, followed by two presentations from excellent keynote speakers that we very much look forward to hearing from, and we will have a number of messages from our partners in the region. We will begin, however, with the beginning, with a greeting from the chair of the SANAD Fund for MSME, Dr. Daniela Beckmann.
Dear partners, investors, shareholders, local financial institutions, regulators, dear stakeholders, and dear friends of SANAD, I would like to extend a warm welcome to the 10 years anniversary of the SANAD Fund. And it's a great pleasure, actually, to celebrate 10 years of impact in the region and to show the fund's achievements, but also to look into SANAD's mission, that is the one of enabling job creation and income generation in the Middle East and North Africa region. Impact investment, by its very nature, is about problem solving and overcoming challenges. The fund has always been a reliable partner to local entrepreneurs, to local financial institutions throughout a full decade of challenges, be it economic, political, or social turbulences. SANAD takes a long-term view on its impact mission and builds on strong partnerships. It's not a secret that truly sustainable development surely does not come overnight. But SANAD, I believe, has the right instruments to offer. Patient capital, debt or equity financing, supported by targeted technical assistance to help institutions to develop a sustainable financial offer to its clients. Equity finance is offered by SANAD for selected greenfielding institutions to expand the outreach to not yet targeted clients, like, for example, rural entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs, or young business owners. The offer of local currency financing complements to SANAD's impact mission in responsible finance offer to the region. To date, this comprehensive approach enabled SANAD to direct more than $785 million in responsible finance through almost more than 50 partner institutions in North Africa, the Middle East, and selected sub-Saharan African countries. Since its inception in 2011, SANAD has thus contributed to more than 230,000 jobs and delivered more than 240,000 loans to entrepreneurs from the region. SANAD's impact is not only founded on strong local expertise and proximity to the region, the SANAD can also build on strong and trustful local partnerships and a very reliable, very committed, long-standing international investor base. As a structured fund, SANAD is able to leverage on substantial contributions from public investors, such as the German Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development, BMZ, the European Commission, the EC, and the Swiss corporation, SECO. This enabled the fund to also get long-term financing from development financial institutions, as well as from impact-oriented private investors. Among them, there are KfW Development Bank, the initiator of the fund in 2011, the Austrian Development Bank OIB, and the Dutch FMO. On the private side, we have GLS Bank and Calvert Impact Investors, for example, as very committed long-term private investors into the fund. This long-term dedication also proved to be resilient in crisis times, in order to strengthen the resilience of the fund, but also to allow for SANAD's COVID response, particularly the C-share investors, BMZ on the one hand side and the European Commission on the other hand side, contributed to additional financing to the fund. This allowed the fund in last year, a record year of additional 160 million in loans committed and more than 50 technical assistance projects targeted to entrepreneurs, helping them to go through the crisis, in particular to strengthen the digital infrastructure. I would really like to thank all our investors for their strong and reliable support over the years, and I really hope we can continue this way also for the decade to come. SANAD is one of the leading impact investment funds in the MENA region. SANAD is committed to developing together sustainable, financial, inclusive systems. We are believing in the potential of hardworking and innovative visionary entrepreneurs in the region, and we believe in the future. I would therefore like to point your attention to the SANAD Impact Report now. The fund is aligned to the Sustainable Development Goals by particularly delivering impact on the following key priorities: MSME financing, agri-finance and building offers along the agricultural value chain, by promoting women entrepreneurship, as well as the promotion of digitalization and fintech solutions as part of an inclusive financial system to be built for the region. We have some very speaking examples, I believe, of these different impacts in the report. I would invite you to browse through the report, to check also the microsite that we've established, which is really showing a lot of impact stories, some highlights in the achievements that the SANAD has made together with its partners. We invite you to go through polls, quizzes, and discover what is on our sites. Really have fun and enjoy. Let me also shed the spotlight now on SANAD's latest development and provide you an outlook into the future. SANAD is looking forward to expanding its mission and its outreach to selected sub-Saharan African countries, so beyond the MENA region. For the last 2 years, the fund has cautiously, carefully, but continuously looked into selected sub-Saharan Africa countries in very difficult times, of course, to expand its mission on the ground also in SSA. As a growing marketplace with dynamic, young, digitally open entrepreneurs and a lot of financial institutions and offers already developed, the Sub-Saharan Africa region provides an interesting ground for SANAD to play and to serve its clients. SANAD wants to help strengthen the links between the MENA region on the one hand side and Sub-Saharan Africa countries. SANAD wants to facilitate the transfer of knowledge between the two regions and bring in its own experience from 10 years of MENA sustainable institution building. The post-pandemic recovery is another area and another work to be done together that will accompany us for the future. To build back better, more resilient, even create new structures together with local financial partners is a challenge that we are ready to invite and to tackle. The mission of the fund is thus not yet completed. The MENA region continues to face a number of persistent challenges, but it also has a lot of potential. It is SANAD's role to remain a reliable, committed partner and to unlock the potential for enabling employment on the one hand side and generating income on the other hand side. As the chair of SANAD's board of directors, I would like to invite you all now to celebrate together and to look into the impact achieved today. We continue, hopefully together also for the next 10 years to come. I look forward to an engaging meeting that connects both investors and stakeholders from the region. I wish us all a very fruitful and rewarding discussion and exchange. Enjoy.
Thank you, Dr. Beckmann. We have greetings to share from two of the cornerstone investors of the SANAD Fund. The first is the German Federal Ministry for International Cooperation and Development, the BMZ. Mr. Volker has sent us greetings. He is the commissioner for the BMZ's activities in the MENA region, as well as in Eastern Europe and Latin America. A video greeting from Mr. Ull.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to everyone. I'm delighted that the SANAD Fund for Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises in the Middle East and North Africa today is celebrating a decade of impact. Congratulations for your achievements. Well done. When the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development BMZ took the decision 10 years ago to invest in the SANAD Fund alongside with the European Commission, we were convinced that it is a timely and very relevant approach to meet the pressing needs for economic perspectives and jobs in the countries of the MENA region. Perspectives and jobs, particularly for the young population, whose aspirations became very visible in the protests of the Arab Spring, which coincided with the foundation of SANAD. In a region where over 70% of businesses and around 3/4 of jobs are made up by micro, small and medium enterprises, SANAD's focus on providing better financing to those businesses and especially targeting the empowerment of female and young entrepreneurs seemed just logical and consequent. Since the beginning, SANAD has succeeded on its mission in sustaining and creating jobs and perspectives and stimulating local economies by constantly increasing the access to finance for MSMEs, throughout or even despite phases of political and socio-economic upheaval. The fund has focused on a broad range of themes: fostering entrepreneurship and MSMEs, local currency finance, agriculture, fintech and digital finance, and, I dare to say, most importantly, women in business. It has also successfully supported technical assistance for partner institutions and borrowers, as well as measures to strengthen the financial sector in the target countries of the fund. BMZ has been a strong partner to SANAD as the fund has grown to be an important and successful vehicle to support the economy and employment in the MENA region. We have continuously provided substantial funding to the fund and have also supported its technical assistance facility for crucially needed technical advice. Nowadays, BMZ is the biggest investor with a total of more than $300 million of shares in the fund and the TA facility. The main reason for our substantial engagement in SANAD is that we are convinced that ensuring stable livelihoods and creating new prospects and jobs are key factors to counteracting crises, strengthening resilience and fostering stability and economic development for the MENA region. This is of high importance to us, in particular in a region that is situated in our direct European neighborhood. Moreover, we think that international collaboration and partnerships are key drivers for development, and SANAD has been a successful tool for winning new investors from public and private sector, and thus multiplying its effect and leverage. In the current COVID-19 pandemic, the fund has also stood its test that it is able to adapt and respond in a flexible and timely manner. In doing so, SANAD has been instrumental in mitigating the devastating effects of the pandemic on the economy and the labour market in the MENA region. I'm therefore very pleased that BMZ, as part of our COVID emergency support programme, provided significant additional funding to the fund and the TA facility last year. Such funding improved the resilience against the secondary effects of the pandemic, not just amongst individuals, but also in wider communities. 10 years of SANAD, so what's next? The mission is not yet accomplished. I can assure you that BMZ continues its unwavering commitment to the hard-working entrepreneurs of the MENA region. It is those who count and who make for a better and brighter future. We are thus looking forward to a further growth of MSMEs and a continued partnership with SANAD in the years to come. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to contribute to this event. I wish you good discussions and reflections on the impact achieved thus far. I hope that together we can turn the coming years of SANAD into a decade of positive impact for the MENA region.
Thank you, Mr. Uhl. Our thanks go to the BMZ as well in Berlin. We now turn to a message from the EU, the European Union, and its acting Director General of DG NEAR, Maciej Popowski.
Hello. I'm honored to be part of this event, which marks an important milestone for the SANAD Fund as it celebrates its 10th anniversary. On this occasion, the EU welcomes the release of the 2020 Impact Report, a decade of supporting entrepreneurship and employment. The EU has supported SANAD on microfinance since its birth in 2011. SANAD corresponds entirely to the EU policy priorities for supporting micro, small and medium-sized enterprises in the neighbourhood south. It responds to fundamental needs in the region, like the need for job creation, access to finance, in particular for micro-enterprises and small entrepreneurs, as well as a stimulating business environment for the private sector. Southern Mediterranean countries continue to face numerous long-term social, economic and institutional challenges, including high unemployment, especially among the youth, low female labour market participation rates, uneven quality of education and costly public services. Micro, small and medium-sized enterprises do not have an easy access to funding in the neighbourhood south, a factor that significantly limits their growth. This is unfortunately even more true now when the COVID-19 crisis has hit severely the region's fragile resilience and dramatically affected its prosperity. The COVID-19 pandemic has certainly brought an additional set of challenges to the economies of the Middle East and North Africa. At the same time, it could also bring new opportunities to benefit from global trends such as reshoring and restructuring of global and regional value chains, or the green and digital transitions. Financial institutions for financial inclusion is critical for the competitiveness of the southern neighborhood, for employment creation, for raising incomes and reducing inequality. As we all know, micro, small and medium-sized enterprises significantly contribute to job creation across the southern Mediterranean, and the private sector and the medium, micro and small enterprises in particular have the potential to make great contributions to their respective economies when given the right conditions. In that regard, the SANAD Fund on Microfinance has had an impressive record by the end of 2020. It has invested over 630 million euro for access to finance for underserved small businesses and households. SANAD has facilitated over 240,000 loans to small borrowers, 135,000 of which were women. SANAD is part of a substantial support package that the EU provides in the neighborhood south for facilitating access to finance to small entrepreneurs and for contributing to inclusive growth and job creation, the regional EU initiative for financial inclusion. This initiative was launched in 2016 and is composed by 5 complementary regional facilities. They're under implementation with different European financial institutions like EBRD, EIB, AFD and KfW, with aim to facilitate access to finance for over 100,000 enterprises. Cooperation with financial institutions plays a key role to leverage much needed investment in the region. The EU has established for that purpose the European Fund for Sustainable Development, which completes the EU toolbox with guarantees and blending. Its successor, the so-called EFSD Plus, will continue reducing the risk for investors and thereby attract additional private sector capital for projects and activities aligned with EU policy objectives. In the spirit of the policy-first approach, a key consideration is the setup of EFSD Plus guarantees, and that's the link between project-focused interventions and support to reforms and investments that achieve deeper and more sustainable results and a more conducive investment climate. Linked to the broader context, in order to strengthen the strategic partnership between the European Union and its southern neighbors, the European Commission has adopted on February the 9th, 2021, a joint communication proposing an ambitious and new agenda for the Mediterranean. The new agenda is based on the conviction that by working together and in a spirit of true partnership, common challenges can be turned into opportunities in the mutual interest of the EU and its southern neighbors. It includes a dedicated economic and investment plan to spur the long-term social economic recovery in the southern neighborhood. Financial institutions will play a critical role in the implementation of the new agenda for the Mediterranean and in particular of the economic and investment plan. We count on our financial partners to strategically engage with DG NEAR and our delegations to roll out the flagship initiatives in various priority sectors. To conclude, I would say that in the context of COVID-19, where solidarity and integration is even more needed than before, the cooperation between various institutions, the European Union, its member states, European development banks in particular, becomes even more crucial to spur long-term social economic recovery in the South. I will end up by praising our partnership with KfW and congratulate SANAD management team for the results achieved so far. Long-term partnerships such as this one is what the region needs. Thank you.
Indeed, impressive results, and thank you, Mr. Popovsky. To hear more about the development and history of SANAD over the last 10 years, we'll now turn to the advisor. I'm happy to welcome 2 directors from Finance in Motion to do so, Mr. Uwe Schober and Ms. Iveta Nikolova, who will give you an overview of what has been accomplished in the last years.
Thank you, Ole.
Yeah, thank you, Ole. And also from us at Finance in Motion, the advisor to the SANAD Fund, a warm welcome to this event today. And Iveta, a decade of creating impact. It's been already 10 years. I can't believe it.
I know, Uwe, it's hard to believe that it's been already 10 years. But how did it all begin? Do you remember?
Yes, I do, actually. It was already in 2010 when KfW had the foresight to initiate this fund to create employment in the MENA region. And Finance in Motion's Klaus Maurer and Mo Morsi went out to look for offices in Cairo. They established the first office in Cairo. And then bang, the Arab Spring started. And there was chaos on Tahrir Square. We didn't know where it was going or so. But one was sure, actually, the need for the SANAD Fund was more necessary than ever.
That's right. The times were very difficult and SANAD had to go very fast. So by 2012, we already had our first loans in the region. The first loan of SANAD was actually to an institution called MEMCO, which is part of the Vitas Group and is these days known as Vitas Jordan. It's one of the largest microfinance institutions in the region and still a very good partner for the fund. We started with a small loan of $3 million and over the years extended over $25 million to Vitas Jordan, financing over 9,000 microloans in the country so far.
Iveta, that was an impressive start, also considering this fragile operating environment that consists until today.
That's very true. The market was not easy, and that's why SANAD had to go even further. And by 2012, SANAD already extended its first local currency facilities again to microfinance institutions in Jordan. This is one of the unique strengths of SANAD, the fact that it has an internal hedging mechanism which is financed by donors and allow it to extend not only foreign currency loans but also local currency facilities to its partners in the region. And that removes the currency risks from both financial partners but also and borrowers. In markets which are subject to so many currency fluctuations, this is a very important part of the responsible finance that SANAD is able to offer to its partners. What came next, Uwe?
Iveta, you mentioned a very important point, risk and risk-taking. So around that time, 2012-13, we established the equity fund within the SANAD umbrella. So we added the equity instrument to the suite of products that the SANAD can offer. And obviously, equity can take more risk, but it also creates a lot of impact.
That's very true. Actually, the ability of SANAD to invest in debt, but also in equity, sets it apart from many other investors in the region. But Uwe, what was the first investment of the equity sub-fund?
That was already in 2013 when we teamed up with the Advance Group, which is an international provider of microfinance institutions or manages them all across the globe. So we teamed up with them, established the Advance Tunisie operation in 2013, but it took another 2 years before we could launch operations. And you know why that was, Iveta? The sector was not ready.
That's right. The sector was not ready. And that's why SANAD, again, with the technical assistance facility, worked very hard with other donors to support the local regulator in putting together the right framework to regulate for-profit microfinance institutions in Tunisia. And thereafter, after many months of preparation, the regulator was finally ready to issue the first licenses for MFIs in Tunisia. And did the equity sub-fund participate, Uwe?
Of course, Iveta, of course. We were proud to be among the first to receive a license to operate a microfinance institution in Tunisia in 2015.
That's right, but one thing which we should not forget is that this investment required a lot more than capital. Because it was a greenfield operation, it needed a lot of support in building it up from the ground, in the areas of product design, in the areas of strategy design, in setting up the risk management function, the standards for underwriting. So SANAD Technical Assistance Facility again put together a comprehensive package for Advanced Tunisie to help it get it off the ground and become one of the most successful MFIs in the country to this date. But I'm getting carried away here. These were also the years when the fund grew quite rapidly, weren't they?
Absolutely, Iveta, you're absolutely right. Around 2014-15, it was the first time that the debt portfolio surpassed $100 million in the region, which enabled 50,000 loans to small entrepreneurs, to micro entrepreneurs and medium-sized entrepreneurs. And I think it could have only achieved because we as Finance in Motion have local staff. So we have people on the ground, they talk to our partners every day, they know their needs, they know the economic environment. So I think this was very crucial to reach this threshold so early on in the development of the SANAD Fund.
I think that's right, but also this was a period when SANAD started putting more and more focus on agri-finance, which is one of the key impact areas for the fund. So we work with partner institutions in providing them with tailored technical assistance to enhance their ability to provide more agri-financing for small farmers and businesses on the ground. We also provide dedicated financing. And this is how SANAD has managed to achieve over a third of its subloans issued extended to date in rural and agricultural regions, which is something we are very proud of.
But also around that time, we made quite substantial progress on the governance side. The Austrian Development Bank joined our roster of shareholders. Andrea Hackmann joined the board of directors of the SANAD fund. And shortly after, FMO became a shareholder and also joined the board of the SANAD fund.
That's right, and this was not all, because this was also the period when the first private investors joined the shareholders of SANAD. This was the GLS Bank, followed shortly afterwards by the first US-based private investors, Calvert Impact. And both of them are still within the shareholders of SANAD and are very strong supporters of the fund, for which we are very thankful.
Yeah, it was also around that time, then 2017-18, when we spotted that fintechs and agtechs became quite disruptive and quite transformative to the microfinance sector. And we now then staged a competition in Jordan with a local partner. We called it FinCluders, and asked startups to pitch for some prize money and pitch for the recognition to win the first prize there. And you know what? The winner, we invested later on, and some of the other startups that were in the competition received technical assistance packages from us.
Yes, that's right. The competition was very timely because it coincided with deep changes on the market at that time. We were seeing a lot of fintechs coming in on the market with new ideas, with innovative business models, and they were reshaping the financial landscape in MENA. And this is where SANAD stepped up again and started working very closely with our partner institutions to help them digitize and automate their operations as well and be able to offer better products and services to micro borrowers. I'll give you an example. For many years now, we work with our network partners, the Vitas Group, in helping them build a digital platform to roll out new products and services for micro borrowers across 4 countries. So going back to you, Uwe.
Well, it was just a logical consequence then to capitalize on this digitization trend to launch another equity fund, since the first equity fund was already fully invested, and have this equity fund focus more on fintechs, agtechs, and digital solutions. And this fund is investing up to date now.
That's right, but this is also a very important year. Moving forward to 2020, we saw the COVID pandemic come to the markets and send multiple shocks through the global economy, but also in the countries in MENA. The fund was again very quick to step up and to put together a crisis response program, supporting our partner institutions in managing the immediate consequences from the pandemic. So we help them with, for example, crisis management, planning for business continuity as a first step. Later on, the fund also put together an innovative product, which was a loan and a grant product for our partner institutions to accelerate further digitalization at for their operations, but also for end borrowers, thus making them more resilient in the very difficult circumstances they were operating in.
That was quite a journey, Iveta, over the last 10 years, quite a journey. Today we have about 50 finance in motion staff that are looking directly or indirectly after the SANAD fund, and many of them local. And I think this gives us the edge over many other funds that operate in a similar region or with a similar product offering, because we are local, we understand the local requirements.
I couldn't agree more. And very recently, we also opened up our 3rd regional hub, the Finance in Motion offices in Kenya, Nairobi, to support the expansion of SANAD into select sub-Saharan countries in another region. So maybe to wrap up, I think it's thanks to this tremendous effort of the team, but also the continuous support from our board of directors, from our investment committee members, that the fund has really managed to achieve and to deliver on its impact mission in the target region. To date, as already mentioned, we have enabled over 240,000 loans to small businesses in the region. We have supported about 250,000 jobs through 49 strategic partnerships in MENA. So what a decade indeed. And now I would like to pass back to Ole, who will take us through the impact strategy of
Indeed,
the fund.
it has been an impressive 10 years, and it is fun to hear about what has been accomplished, especially in these innovations regarding the equity subfund and fintech and digitalization. So thank you for this. We'll continue with a broader look at the impact of the fund and how the fund pursues impact. In the meanwhile, I'll take the opportunity to highlight our microsite. As mentioned by Dr. Beckmann, the SANAD Fund created its first impact report for 2020, looking not only at the activities of the fund in 2020 and what it accomplished, but also the accomplishments of the fund in its first 10 years. This, being the modern world, is now put together in the form of a microsite, the link to which has been shared with you, and which you can access to look through, and we invite you to explore. There is a lot to discover in there, and we hope that you enjoy the look across our operations. To help you get into the report, we have assembled a selection of staff from Finance in Motion who can introduce different aspects of the site to you and different aspects of the fund's operations and impact over the last 10 years. We'll begin with Sarah Hessel. Sarah is a manager at Finance in Motion and manages the Impact and Sustainability Department. And she will talk to you about the impact that SANAD achieves, its strategy to do so, and much more.
Thank you, Ole, and good afternoon, everyone. I do dare say that no one of you would disagree with me if I say SANAD is an impact fund, neither here in the audience nor online. Good, I hear no objections. What does that actually mean, that SANAD is an impact fund? As the impact investing industry is growing, so are the initiatives to set common standards and requirements to ensure integrity, but also to support investors in taking their investment decisions. So towards that end, the Global Impact Investing Network, the GIN, has coined the 4 core characteristics of impact investing, which are intentionality, use of impact data and evidence, manage impact performance, and finally contributing to the growth of the industry. And even though those characteristics were set years after SANAD was launched, they perfectly describe SANAD's approach and commitment to impact. Let's look at this. Number 1, intentionality is about the clear goal to contribute to positive change for people and our planet. We've heard earlier already that SANAD's mission is to contribute to economic growth in its target region. And to achieve this mission, SANAD is implementing an impact strategy, which we have here summarized in an impact pathway. What we see actually is that SANAD aims to contribute not only to 1, but to 2 levels of impact. 1 being the direct impact on the financial and entrepreneurship ecosystem. By providing dedicated finance and tailored technical assistance, SANAD works with its partners to really integrate MSME focus in their business operations. This then leads to an enhancement of lending and services available to MSMEs, both in terms of quality and scale. Using these lending and services is basically a critical input for MSMEs to grow and sustain their operations, thereby creating employment opportunities and contributing to economic growth overall. And this is then how SANAD achieves its final impact at the top level. In doing so, SANAD also contributes to the Sustainable Development Goals. And the 6 development goals that we see featured in the report and on this beautiful microsite have been selected based on a comprehensive mapping of SANAD's activities towards the SDG targets. And we don't only use them for communication, but we also really use them to inform our impact strategy and to substantiate the impact reporting. This impact strategy was built drawing on evidence and impact studies, including the fund's very own impact and market studies. Which brings me to criteria number 2, the use of data and evidence to inform investment strategy. Impact isn't something that just happens. It requires intentionality, which we just reflected on, but it also requires consistent targeting. In order to address challenges, you need to understand the challenges that you're trying to work for. You also need to understand the needs of the people and institutions you're aiming to serve. As we all know, SANAD is targeting MSMEs, as they're a driver for economic development, providing more than 3/4, as we already heard of jobs in the region, and representing 70% of all businesses. Yet despite this important role, many of them lack access to finance. So the impact strategy is guiding SANAD's investment approach, starting from the selection of the partners who share our vision, to defining use of proceeds criteria, which then direct the financing to small businesses and enterprises, including those in rural areas and owned by women. The impact strategy also informs the portfolio composition. As you all know, MSMEs they're not just one homogeneous group. They differ in their size, in their growth aspiration, in their financing needs. And in order to address all these needs, we aim to work with a range of different partner institutions. This then also allows us to work towards the full spectrum of impact. Take, for example, job supported. We've seen from our studies that small and medium-sized enterprises are more likely to create jobs, while micro enterprises are those that play a really important role for income generation and self-employment. So this is why we strive for a balance in the portfolio between those institutions that support microenterprises, such as microfinance institutions, and those that strengthen the SME sector, such as commercial banks and leasing companies. Once capital has been deployed, impact data continues to play an important role in order to meet core criteria number 3, manage impact performance. SANAD integrates impact management along the whole chain of investment, along with the standards set by the operating principles for impact management. In order to manage performance, of course, we need to be able to monitor and assess that. And to do so, we use many different data sources, including quarterly reporting by our investees on how they use the financing and who that financing reaches. In addition, we collaborate with the Technical Assistance Facility to conduct in-depth studies on the markets, on the end borrowers, and on other criteria that are important for our investments. In addition, our presence in the region also enables us to generate market insights, but what's more, it allows us to engage continuously with our partners. And that then allows us to identify needs for extra steering and support early on, be that the strengthening of an environmental and social management system or deploying additional capital, as in the case of the COVID-19 pandemic. Going beyond the individual needs of impact performance and managing that for our investments, the impact system also allows us to identify lessons that then fine-tune strategy and inform innovations. For example, recognizing the need for more local currency financing to protect small businesses from currency risk, we set up a special share class devised to increase local currency financing. Launching this share class for SANAD and observing its solid impact, it has now already been introduced to 2 additional funds, which is an excellent example for core criteria number 4, growing the industry. SANAD does recognize that we need to grow the industry both in terms of financing available, but also in terms of quality. So in addition to building that strong regional platform for knowledge exchange between the partner institutions, between regulators, between business development organizations, and of course the entrepreneurs themselves, SANAD is an active member of the impact investing community. By contributing to conferences, by contributing to external evaluations and studies, and continuously reporting on impact, SANAD does get the word out that investing with purpose is feasible. Lastly, also this event today is a testament to the fund's strong commitment to sharing its knowledge and learnings with partners and stakeholders, such as with all of you who have joined us today. And with that, Ole, back over to you.
Thank you, Sarah. A thorough and very impressive approach to the study and management and observation of impact for the fund. We'll now hand over to our Regional Director for Investment in the MENA region, Ms. Burcu Karpuz. Burcu has long contributed and been a driving force within the investment sphere in SANAD, and she will tell us today about the strategy and impact of SANAD in focusing on a couple of the topics that are key to SANAD's strategy. So with no further ado, Burcu.
Thank you very much, Ole. I'm sorry that I missed the opportunity to be with you in Frankfurt today and have to join from locally Istanbul. But yeah, soon I have to be back to Frankfurt again, but also to the region, to be with our partner institutions also, physically and face-to-face as well. It's a great pleasure to be together with our business partners today, celebrating the 10th anniversary of the SANAD Fund. And as everybody knows, SANAD has been a great supporter of MSMEs, women entrepreneurs, startups, and all types of small and medium-sized businesses that face difficulties in the MENA and SSA regions in terms of accessing financial as well as non-financial services. Of course, we would never be able to achieve the impact we created in the region in the last 10 years without the collaboration and cooperation of the fund's valuable business partners. One of the most important segments that SANAD Fund has been supporting via cash facilities as well as extensive technical support since the establishment is agriculture. This sector is very important, especially in North African and Sub-Saharan African countries due to its contribution to GDP growth, but also to the workforce. And we see increasing focus in the last years from local governments, regulators, financial institutions, and other stakeholders on agricultural production. Sustainable and productive farming is becoming more and more critical for the communities. Today, I would like to provide some highlights related to SANAD's achievements and impact created in that area. SANAD has dispersed $84 million of agri-sub loans to end borrowers through its partner financial institutions since establishment. The fund supported more than 25,000 farmers in the region, and the outstanding exposure to farmers stands at $28.7 million as of the first half of this year. Thanks to our partners, almost 40% of our outstanding exposure to agri-sector is in Egypt. With SANAD Fund, our partner banks, with the SANAD Fund, our partner banks support small farmers, but also agricultural exporters and SMEs in the country, in Egypt. Tunisia is also a large contributor to the fund's outreach to the agri-sector. Our long-standing leasing and MFI partners in Tunisia own land approximately 35% of the total SANAD agri-sub loans to their clients in the rural areas. And in the recent years, we see increasing on-lending volumes to agri-sector from our partners in Palestine, Morocco, Jordan, as well as our partners countries in Sub-Saharan Africa as well. SANAD Fund is giving utmost attention to the development of agri-sector and therefore established its Agricultural Competence Center in 2019 to support technical assistance projects and increase outreach of financial institutions to farmers. Agri-Competence Center will be soon finalizing its first project with iScore in Egypt, establishing a credit scoring model for the financial institutions who are willing to increase their outreach to farmers in the rural parts of the country. So taking this opportunity, I would really like to thank iScore for their support and therefore for their cooperation with the SANAD Fund. We plan to start integration of the scoring model in Egyptian banks early 2022 and increase their lending to agri-sector as well. We hope to replicate the same model in other MENA and Sub-Saharan Africa countries as well. SANAD support to agri-sector and financial inclusion of farmers have been extensive also via its equity investments in the region. So as my colleagues have mentioned, SANAD has been doing equity investments in MENA since 2013. And the Tanwil has been one of the pioneer banks institution in Tunisia, as well as in the region, with its tailored services and loans to farmers. The institution received technical support from SANAD to develop its agri-strategy, manage risks, develop and implement new technology tools, and also train its staff. As a result, the institution increased lending to rural and agri clients to almost 1/3 of its portfolio. And the Tanwil is a great example and a model for the financial institutions, providing that with the right projects and focus, enhancing support to agri sector and creating impact is not impossible. SANAD Technical Assistance Facility Committee has approved 316 projects since establishment of the fund. The committee has provided nearly $9 million in grants to support implementation of TA projects in the region. Out of this, 21 projects and $1.7 million roughly grants are earmarked for agri sector. The scope of the projects are quite wide: strategy development, implementation, product development, loan evaluation systems, training for employees, agri-value chain finance, models, HR strategy for agri-finance development, as well as, and more important, building a bridge between Middle East and Sub-Saharan Africa by facilitating exchange and knowledge transfer between the two regions. SANAD Technical Assistance Facility goes well beyond its support to partner institutions, having done a great deal at the sector level, such as working with numerous regulators around the region, supporting bankers and microfinance networks, associations, or reaching out to provide capacity building to entrepreneurs and our partners as clients. Last but not least, SANAD has been working very closely with agritechs in the region to improve their financial capabilities, governance, business models, and outreach to farmers in other countries, as well as international investors. We are very proud to be a supporter of the agri sector and farmers in the region. I would like to conclude my words by saying we are just starting our long journey with our partners and other stakeholders to reach out to agri-producers and SMEs who need us with all the respect. And I would like to hand it over to Ole again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Burcu. It's been an interesting look at how SANAD has really gone in depth to support agri-finance and has really gone beyond the expected borders to serve that sector. We'll now turn to a contribution in absentia. We have a colleague, Zain Al-Bailani, who will now present on one of the unique aspects of the SANAD fund that we've already heard about from multiple presenters, which is its capacity to provide financing in local currency. Unfortunately, Zain cannot join us today, albeit for a very happy reason, namely that he is in hospital currently expecting his first child. So we are pulling with all our might for his success on this day and give you his contribution.
Thank you, Ole. Since inception, SANAD realized the importance of local currency financing in supporting employment and financial inclusion in the MENA region. As an investment vehicle operating in emerging markets with an impact mission, SANAD noted the gap in local currency financing, as many financial intermediaries, especially microfinance institutions, are faced with a demand for local currency financing from entrepreneurs, while international funding available to these institutions is in hard currencies. This gap exposes these institutions to foreign currency risk that they are not equipped to handle and would have negative implications on the micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises and would weaken the entrepreneurs' ecosystem in the MENA region. SANAD has a wide set of tools to bridge this gap and to protect MSMEs from this risk. One of these instruments is equity financing in local currency that meets the need for patient capital required for supporting SANAD's impact mission. On the debt financing side, and beside working with external hedging counterparties, SANAD L shares represent a unique and innovative instrument that enables unhedged local currency lending in a sustainable manner that provides protection to the rest of the capital structure. By providing loans valued in local currency, SANAD local partners would provide financing to their clients in local currencies and would be able to repay SANAD's loan using the proceeds received from MSMEs without entering into complex FX agreements or operations. SANAD L shares have been introduced in 2012 to the debt sub-fund capital structure, with financing from the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, the BMZ, and have played an important role in complementing the externally available hedging solutions. This unique instrument allows SANAD to tailor its local currency offering to the local market demand in a way that would not have been possible when working with external counterparties, thus creating unique products that elevate the impact of SANAD financing. Lately, the importance of patient local currency financing was evident in the economic implications of COVID-19 outbreak that was accompanied with uncertainty and fluctuations in the emerging markets' currencies. The L shares played an important role in these times that complemented SANAD's COVID-19 response measures in a sustainable manner and provided stability to SANAD's capital. In total, SANAD has provided more than 110 million USD equivalent in local currency debt financing and more than 20 million USD equivalent in local currency financing from equity side, targeted mainly to microfinancing institutions in 6 local currencies in the MENA region and lately in the sub-Saharan Africa region. Local currency financing enables entrepreneurs to invest in their future without worrying about currency fluctuations and provides stability to the fund's partner institutions. I invite you to read SANAD's impact report for more information on the fund's local currency activities. Back to you, Ole.
What Zane says is certainly true, that it is a unique aspect of the fund that we can provide for our partners and indeed their clientele to protect against FX risk in surprising ways. So I think we'll move on in our program and we'll hand the mic to Matthias Dietrich. Matthias is the manager at Finance in Motion for the SANAD equity funds, Equity Sub Fund 2 and Equity Sub Fund 2. Did I say two twice? Both funds, 1 and 2. And he is here to tell us a little bit about the life of both funds and their investments. Matthias.
Thank you very much, Ole. I think after all those interesting presentations of my colleagues, I hope I can still add something. But let's go quickly back to 2012, when we started the first equity sub-fund and what has happened since then. I think we are now looking back with the first fund on 5 partner institutions that we have invested in. You know, all of them have a different nature. We have 2 companies in Tunisia that are both microfinance institutions. We have 2 companies in Egypt. One of them is a leasing company. The other one is as well microfinance. And we have 1 microfinance institution in Jordan. Most of these companies have a different stage of development. Some of them are more mature than others. But I think overall we are on a really, really good track to fulfill the mission and vision of the SANAD Fund, to deliver services to SMEs, to grow them, to have an impact on the financial system in those countries, and to create lasting impact. So let's maybe quickly take a look at one of the investments on the micro side as well. It's called Sanda for MSME. We have actually set up Sanda in early stages. It's one of the 3 greenfields out of the 5 investments in the first fund. I think Sanda is still on a developmental path, right? A greenfield in an emerging market does not develop or scale as quickly as you would expect this from already a market that is fully developed. I think there are three things where I really think SANAD has put its mark down. First of all, we provide patient and smart capital, right? We don't require immediate returns, but we have set SANAD up for the next steps. We have started right with them. We have helped them creating policies and procedures. We have connected them to a network. The second thing is the technical assistance that is of high added value in such a greenfield. I think SANAD has received several technical assistance approvals and money from the technical assistance facility, helping them to establish rules and regulations, to train their staff to be able to move on to the next spot. They're still in development, but I think it shows what SANAD can accomplish if you're looking at the equity team from the Equity Subfund 1, if you look at TA, if you look at the whole group, its name and exposure that the company can receive from the fund to support SMEs to develop financial markets. Another thing that is happening now in the first fund is we are having our first exit. Can't talk much about it right now. Hope to inform you soon about more. We are all excited to see that. The fund life of the first fund is slowly coming to an end. I think we have another 2-3 years. We're really looking forward to the exits that are coming. Still significant work ahead. But the other exciting thing is that in 2019, we started ESF2, the Equity Subfund 2. So we basically kept the initial investment thesis of ESF1, being financial institutions in a target region that we find interesting, where we can have impact, where we can develop SMEs and be of supporting and added value. So what has changed, right? So we looked at the market and thought, like, what is driving the market? What is really important? Where can we be innovative? And we added tech investments here to the fund. So we are looking not only at financial institutions like small banks, leasing, MFIs, we are looking as well at fintechs, at agtechs, at anything that can be of high added value to SMEs. Furthermore, we are carefully expanding towards sub-Saharan Africa. So I think it is a very challenging but a very interesting market. We have a lot of talent. We have a lot of interesting companies. Not everything is always what it seems, right? But we are trying to find the right mix between a classical financial institution investment, tech investment, but as well, you know, staying true to our core values, supporting SMEs, but as well creating high impact. So one of the companies, which is as well in the micro side, is Sky Garden. It's one of the 3 investments that we have currently in the second fund, the second equity sub-fund. There is a message from James and Martin, a Kenyan team that has an online marketplace where SMEs and partially very small corner shop SMEs can sell their products through the platform, low margin, high impact on the SMEs. Sky Garden has shipping involved, next day delivery in centers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So they're looking, their next step is first of all to integrate financing for the SMEs. The step further is actually to looking at MENA. Right? This is our story here. We are looking at a company that is interested in, you know, MENA markets, Egypt, Tunisia, etc. So we see great alignment here in the mission and vision that we have with SANAD. We already have 2 further investments in the ESF. Looking forward to build up the fund in the next years with the team, together with a strong SANAD foundation, a strong SANAD head fund, and as well, at one point, we hope as well that the investments that we made into with the equity fund will be eligible for debt transactions with the debt fund. So I think if we at one point can accomplish this would be a huge step. And until then, we want to stay true to the mission and vision of SANAD. We want to support local SMEs. We want to grow them through financial intermediaries or directly. And yeah, I think with this, almost everything is said, and I would hand back to Ole to at least close the session of the advisor, last but not least.
Happily.
Thank you. Thank you.
Happily, thank you. So we have seen how SANAD approaches impact and effectuates it on the ground, particularly focusing on specific topics, You've heard about the different topics today. You've heard about agri-finance. You've heard mentions of the other topics that we work on, fintech and digitalization, and women's empowerment, etc. We'll now turn to try saying it again. Excuse me. Communication from the régie, from the directors. Yes, so we have seen much of what we have seen different aspects of SANAD's operations. Now we have talked about its ability and strategy for delivering impact, its ability to do so on focal topics such as agri-finance and to guide investments and support investments throughout. We've talked about the local currency aspects of SANAD's operations and how it can protect its partners and indeed their clientele by offering lending in local currency. And finally, we've heard about the equity subfund and its ability to develop institutions from the ground up and help institutions, innovative outreach institutions that can change the way that finance is activated or used on local markets. We'll now, however, turn to a look at the future and the current markets and their potential development. We're now joined by two of our favorite people today, and those two speakers are prominently highlighted on our microsite and in the invitation, so no introduction may be necessary, and indeed their resumes are so long and diamond-studied that any introduction would fall short. Before introducing the speakers, however, I would like to highlight that in the coming section, we very much welcome your questions. You may submit your questions via Slido. You will see an overlay on your screen, and you'll be able to put your questions into Slido. However, you are the moderators now. You are going to make my job easy. Not only do you have the opportunity to enter your questions, but also the opportunity to upvote or downvote other questions. Thus, you are the directors of the coming section in terms of our question and answer session, which will follow the presentations by the speakers. We'll begin with Mayada El Zoghbi. Mayada is the CEO of the Center for Financial Inclusion. Many of you may know her from her previous work. She was previously at CGAP and spent 10 years with CGAP and was very involved and very present in the Middle East and North Africa, of course, and has had a long history in financial systems development and the research and associated with it and looking at trends of how we can develop things. So with no further ado, I hand over to Mayada. Mayada, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Yes.
So good morning, everyone. I'm very honored to be here with you today. Of course, morning my time, afternoon yours. It's a real privilege for me to participate in this historic anniversary. And I've been following SANAD's work for many, many years and have really appreciated the catalytic role that SANAD plays in the MENA region. For those of you who don't know me, I am the managing director at the Center for Financial Inclusion, which was created by Action International, which is a nonprofit based in the United States. CFI was actually created at a different crisis moment. It was in 2008, right after the financial crisis, and at a time when the microfinance industry was facing another, let's call it, indebtedness crisis around the world, and CFI was created to really address this issue, this systemic problem that was happening across the world. And over the years, we've continued to prioritize issues around consumer protection. and other priorities for the inclusive finance space. So before I get started, I just want to do a little bit of level setting, kind of where are we today? Now we're in this moment in another, we remain in a crisis moment. The pandemic has been around for 18 months now. It's had very different effects in different parts of the world, and I'll talk a little bit about that in my talk. But beyond the pandemic, there's also been just unprecedented events happening around the world, whether it was scorching temperatures, whether it was floods in different parts of the world, whether it's been fires. It's been really an incredible moment in history where there's just been so much hardship, whether it's, again, weather-based or whether it's health-based. Now, some countries around in the world have not had as much impact, and I think the MENA region in some ways has not been affected as some of the countries I'm going to cover today in some of the data that I'll be sharing. I'll talk about three main things. One is I just want to share some of the data we are collecting on micro and small enterprises in different parts of the world and how they've been coping with COVID-19. I'll also be talking a little bit about some of the research we've been doing on recovery measures that investors or policymakers have been taking to help address some of these, some of the impacts on micro and small enterprises. And then I want to touch on, what does the future hold? Where do I see opportunities that all of us collectively can work on together? So let me just start with some of the research that CFI has been doing. Now, we've selected countries that are representative in different regions of the world. And I do want to apologize that we don't have a MENA country. I had hoped to have one when we were launching this research, but somehow it just didn't come about. So we've done research in Nigeria, Indonesia, Colombia, and India, where we have been tracking a subset of micro and small enterprises that are clients of financial institutions. And we've been tracking them every 2 months. We collect data on how they're faring. The samples are a bit different across the regions, across the different countries. In some of the markets, we have partners who have, like in India, for example, where the vast majority of the customers are women. In other countries, that's in Indonesia. In other countries, like India, it's the reverse, many more men than women. So it's somewhat diversified. Some of the partners, for example, are very tech savvy, like in Colombia, whereas others are very early stage in their technology transformation. We've completed 6 waves of data collection over the course of a little over a year in all the markets except India. India is one of the countries where there's been a resurgence of the pandemic with the Delta variant, and we've had to actually halt some of our data collection because of the impact in that market. So what are we finding? We'll start with the revenue. How have MSMEs been dealing with revenue over the different waves of data collection over the 18 months of the COVID pandemic? And what you see is everybody was hit in the very early phases of the pandemic, and you see consistent and slow recovery in most of the markets. You'll see the yellow line where India, actually the situation has deteriorated quite dramatically. Most micro and small enterprises in India are unable to meet their revenue is not covering their expenses. So it is a pretty dramatic decline there. In terms of employment, we all know that micro and small enterprises are the most important job source for most low-income people in many developing countries. And so what happens with MSMEs affects employment pretty dramatically. And again, we've seen a pretty dramatic effect on employment across all the markets we've covered. This was very evident in wave 1 of the data collection, so very early in the pandemic, and then you've started to see recovery. In most countries, however, we have not reached pre-pandemic levels of employment, so there's still a ways to go. The fastest recovery, the most resilient recovery thus far, has been in Nigeria, whereas in India and a few other markets, it's been less robust. In terms of the households, so obviously the effect on the business is pretty dramatic. It affects employees, it affects overall economies, but it also affects the households themselves, the business owners and their families. And how have these business revenues impacted households? You do see increased food insecurity. You do see households unable to meet their expenses. Again, there is a slight improvement over the different waves, but nothing yet at pre-pandemic levels. It has not returned completely to pre-pandemic levels. You do see some markets where even the owners of the firms are unable to, you're seeing kind of food insecurity in the sense of they're eating smaller meals, some of them are eating fewer meals, and in some cases there are family members going to bed hungry. You see that it's been the worst in Nigeria of all of the markets. So how have these MSMEs been coping? Well, they have been relying primarily on savings, and you're seeing a very dramatic decline in savings balances in all of the markets. You also see them taking on additional debts. So in all of the markets, you're beginning to see multiple borrowing, and in some cases, you're also beginning to see people skipping their loan repayments, which is obviously a big problem, not only for them, but for the financial institutions that serve them. So I know many of you are coming from the MENA countries, and some of the things I've just talked about are not as visible in the MENA region. However, there have been other effects that are very evident in the region, and that is the impact on women has been much more stark than the impact on men. So you see that in several different ways. So more women-owned businesses are closing in the MENA region. You are also seeing women taking on much more domestic and care responsibilities than in other regions of the world. And then I think the issue that is far worse is that women are not benefiting from a lot of the social assistance that's been happening across the countries. So the MENA region, women are not the recipients of this assistance. So the impact on their businesses is greater. So not to sound completely pessimistic, I do want to shift slightly and say there's a lot still that's been happening that is supporting the resilience and the recovery of these micro and small enterprises. We've really seen an unprecedented amount of support to micro and small enterprises and the financial services providers that serve them. We've seen many measures that countries have taken around the world. So, for example, we've seen a lot of loan moratoria that have been instituted. We've seen loan restructuring. We've seen a deferral of interest payments. We've seen liquidity facilities that have been established for the banking system. In some markets, some of the liquidity facilities have also been trying to target the FSPs that serve low-income people. We've seen credit guarantees being deployed in various countries, and I would say in the MENA region, probably more so than other places. And we've seen targeted liquidity facilities. Now, in summary, a lot of these facilities, a lot of these initiatives have not always trickled down to the FSPs that serve the low-income consumers and the micro and small enterprises that we care so much, that we care most about. Much more would actually need to be done to specifically target the MSMEs that we care about. The moratoria, however, have delayed some of the liquidity constraints that people predicted. Let me just keep going quickly. So the situation for the microfinance industry and the financial service providers that serve low-income people has not been as badly as originally predicted. Specifically, we did not see this liquidity crisis that everyone anticipated, but we don't know the long-term effects of the pandemic, and it's not quite clear what will happen. However, we are seeing very good signs of recovery. So we're seeing lending back up in many markets. We're seeing portfolio at risk, not as bad as in the early phases of the pandemic. In some, it went as high as 60% in some markets, and it is now down to a much more manageable level. And then we're seeing a lot of strategies that MFIs have been using to weather the storm. Many have resorted to looking for digital means to engage with their customers. Others have used flexible staffing or other different underwriting policies to ensure that they can continue to lend during the pandemic. I've hinted at it already. One of the really defining moments of the pandemic is the fact that governments have stepped in a much bigger way than we've seen in prior crises. You have many more governments instituting cash transfers. 200 countries have either introduced or expanded their cash transfer programs. And they've done a lot of different techniques to try to reduce risks and harms by deploying digital onboarding, by reducing some of the KYC requirements, by expanding the way they identify eligible consumers. So it's been an incredible lifeline that's been very helpful across these markets. The other issue to highlight is the fact of the role of digitalization to build resilience for micro and small enterprises and for consumers generally. There's no question that the use of digital channels has really helped to improve people's resilience during the pandemic. We've seen an incredible increase in the use of digital transactions. GSMA's latest State of the Industry reports has noted that there's 1.2 billion accounts now today, an increase of almost 13% since the pandemic. Monthly transaction volumes have increased dramatically. We now have 300 million active accounts. It took the MNO industry 10 years to reach 100 million active accounts, and in the last 5 years they've tripled that number. So a pretty massive uptake of digital technology. What we've seen, though, is that there is this divergence happening. MSMEs, micro and small enterprises, that had some pre-preparedness, had some digital readiness pre-pandemic, were able to really leverage the digital transformation that's been happening under COVID and have continued to prosper and grow. There are Visa and others have put out reports documenting that growth. However, our data, which is really focused on much smaller entrepreneurs, those who were not necessarily digitally savvy or digitally ready, we've seen some stagnation in their ability to adopt. And so we're realizing that for the very micro firms, there's going to be much more that's needed to get them to adopt the digital transformation that's happening around the world. So, looking forward, what do I think might happen, and would love to talk to you all about this in the Q&A section. So clearly, a lot has changed in the last 18 months, and I don't think things are going to ever go back to normal. We do have an opportunity here to consolidate some of the changes that have been happening in the world and to really improve the resilience of both firms and people. And the biggest opportunity is, of course, the digital transformation that's been happening around the world. We're seeing this already happen, and I'm sure many of you have already started on that path. What we're seeing, a lot of opportunities with not so much full digital transformation, doing it by yourself, but in the opportunities that arise with partnerships and collaboration. So we're seeing many MFIs partnering with e-commerce platforms or fintechs, and there are examples in the MENA region. For example, in Egypt, you have Max AB partnering with an MFI, and in other countries like in Bolivia, you're seeing a very traditional bank, Banco Sol, partnering with a fintech. So you're seeing some of these innovative collaborations happening around the world, and I think that we need more of these, and we need them to happen faster. The other area that gives me optimism for this region is the kind of the openness of the regulators and the policymakers in the region. This is not a region that is known for cutting edge innovation on the regulatory side. This is a conservative region in general. However, in the last couple of years, we've really seen changes taking place across the regulatory and policy space. You're seeing much more openness to innovation. Many of the countries around the region are experimenting with sandboxes to allow them to test and learn as innovations come out. You're seeing many more regulatory reforms that are about the digital economy, that are enabling new innovations to take hold. And then you're seeing just engagement at the global level in an unprecedented way among the regulators, participation in AFI and among other fora. So this gives me a huge optimism for where this region is going. And then bottom line is, when you look at just around in terms of what's happening with people, the entrepreneurial ecosystem in the region is thriving incredibly. You're seeing, to be honest, it's very hard to keep up with all of the changes that are happening on that front. You're seeing many, many more accelerators, a lot more incubators, and a lot of investors. I myself became an angel investor in the region, and I know many of my friends have as well. And what you're seeing is the result of that. So you're seeing an incredible amount of capital that is flowing to some of these new innovations coming in the region. So the investment flows, whether it's large firms buying smaller ones, or whether it's venture capitalists entering, you're seeing a lot more investment flows coming to the region. You're seeing increased DFIs, participation. You're seeing government participating as well. So you're seeing a lot more kind of excitement around what's happening in the region. So in my view, this region has the formula for success in terms of entrepreneurship and innovation. It's a region with very large numbers of young people, relatively high literacy, relatively high smartphone penetration, internet usage, and this is happening amidst this kind of digital transformation that's happening and digital adoption that's happening with consumers, as well as a change in perception on what it means to be an entrepreneur. You have many, many more young people that are choosing entrepreneurship over the traditional view that working for government is the way to go. So to me, this is a formula for continued entrepreneurship and innovation in the region. And I know my Haifa will continue on this theme, but just I wanted to flag one thing. Despite all of this tremendous potential, it is still not equal. Women are still not participating in the same way as men in the region. There are many initiatives, and some of them are listed here on my slide. There are many initiatives that are trying to bring women into the opportunities that we're seeing in finance, in entrepreneurship, but much more can be done. One of the positive signs is that you have many women investors coming to the region, which I think is very exciting. But that's all I have for today, and then I definitely hope to talk to more of you during the Q&A. I'll hand it over. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mayada. This has been a very interesting and deep presentation. I think there are a number of things. I think we'll have a lot of questions. I certainly hope so. And along those lines, please do enter your questions on Slido and upvote, downvote questions so that we can enrich our discussion during the Q&A. I already have a couple of questions along the lines of this presentation already surrounding the interesting results and recovery among the MSMEs. So, but let us move on to our next speaker first before we return to those questions. And it's my pleasure to introduce Haifa Al-Kaylani. Born in Palestine, raised in Lebanon and the UK, Ms. Al-Kaylani is best known as the founder and chair of the Arab International Women's Forum. Haifa is, however, at her core a development economist, an alumna of the American University of Beirut and Oxford University. Her experience and bona fides could fill quite the list. Without further ado, then, I'll hand over to Haifa and Kaylani to talk about the future of the region. Oh, Haifa, I don't believe we can hear you. Maybe now? No, not yet, I don't believe. We'll just take a moment to figure things out on our side, and we should have it working in just a moment here. I will continue with my introduction then by adding that Haifa holds a number of board seats and senior roles in several cultural and education, non-governmental British, MENA region, and international institutions. Among others, she was a commissioner for the ILO Global Commission on the Future of Work for a few years and has extensive experience then in the topics of the day and a breadth of knowledge from which we hope to benefit. Maybe we can try the sound again. No. Still not working. Now could you try? There you go. No, it was on our side and now solved. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you very much. It's indeed a great honor and pleasure for me personally and as president and founder of the Arab International Women's Forum to be invited to address today the very special occasion of the 10th anniversary on the founding of SANAD Fund for MSMEs. I really wish to take this opportunity to extend very sincere congratulations from me and from the AIWF to the SANAD Fund on this very important occasion, and to acknowledge the valued work of SANAD and its impact in the region over the last decade in helping micro, small, and medium enterprises fulfill their roles as engines of inclusive economic growth, job creation, and prosperity. I'm also delighted to note that both SANAD and the Arab International Women's Forum celebrate important milestones this year, as 2021 marks the 20th anniversary since I founded AIWF in London in 2001 as a development organization to lead the drive for sustainable empowerment for women and young people in the MENA region. Indeed, all of us gathered here today on this very special occasion are deeply involved in addressing the region's most salient development challenges and are aware that empowering women's economic participation, whether in entrepreneurship or the private sector, is a key part of the roadmap to unlocking the region's economic potential. First, allow me to share a brief overview on the role of women in the MENA economy. The economic empowerment and inclusion of women in the region has long presented one of the most critical development challenges for policymakers. Despite undeniable progress made in many MENA states in the last 2 decades on gender equality and enhancing women's participation in political life, in business, and in entrepreneurship, the region still has the lowest rate of female labor force participation in the world at less than 25%. The gender gap is not a MENA issue. It is a universal challenge that affects every region of the world and every economy in different ways. Globally, if women had the same lifetime earnings as men, global wealth would increase in the 141 countries studied by $160 trillion. The OECD finds that the MENA economies are collectively losing an estimated $575 billion a year due to the legal and social barriers that exist around women's access to jobs and careers. Estimates indicate that the MENA region would certainly benefit from a 50% boost to economic output if women were empowered to participate in the workforce to the same extent as men. MENA countries have long recognized the need for robust, world-class education for all citizens as a key factor to attain economic growth and development. Across the region, we are heartened by the rates of women and girls acquiring education to see that they have increased significantly over the last half century. In 2020, just to give one example, the highest percentage of female literacy in the region was in Jordan at 97.8%. In Algeria, Palestine, Libya, Tunisia, Kuwait, and the United Arab Emirates, more than half of the students on many university courses, especially the STEM and the law, are women. In Qatar and Saudi Arabia, female university students outnumber men 2-to-1. So in the last decade especially, and due to this investment in education by regional governments, Arab women have become increasingly prominent in high-level leadership positions, advancing rapidly in professions previously dominated by men, including finance, aviation, business, technology, academia, research, and STEM careers, and challenging gender bias in nearly every sector. Arab women are also commanding a never greater presence on corporate boards, in senior executive leadership positions, in top jobs at multinationals, and taking the helm at family-owned businesses. In most Arab countries, women are being elected and appointed to the highest diplomatic and institutional roles. The recent appointment of Dr. Najla Boudin as Prime Minister of Tunisia is a first in the region and sets a lead example to be followed. Now, as the region begins to move beyond the pandemic, governments and private sector are joining forces to develop and implement policies and measures aimed at empowering women to create their own opportunities, to contribute to and benefit from economic prosperity. Women in entrepreneurship, women in the informal economy, in rural economies, in agriculture, women refugees, and women living in poverty throughout the Arab world, all are top priority for key stakeholders in the region. We feel there is a new momentum, a new energy towards empowering both men and women, and especially the youth, with gender equality a priority in all the regional visions towards meeting the SDGs by 2030. So whilst we all are aware that a number of persistent barriers do remain, which need to be addressed before we can achieve full gender parity, yet it is very important for us all to acknowledge the remarkable progress that has been made by women to date, and to build on the region's many success stories and nurture the green shoots of change. To look at the current status of female entrepreneurship in the MENA. Empowering women to contribute to the economy represents a major opportunity to boost competitiveness, private sector growth, and job creation, which would power the MENA into a new era of prosperity and potential. As I mentioned, we are proud to witness that women are taking the lead as CEOs, chairing boards, and taking top positions in their family businesses, which, according to a recent PwC report, constitute up to 90% of all companies, employ 80% of the workforce, and contribute up to 60% of the GDP in the region. Across the region, women-owned SMEs are also on the rise. In the GCC, Jordan and Egypt especially, women are launching their own businesses in record numbers, inspiring the next generation of women leaders. To share, in the MENA, majority of women entrepreneurs surveyed by the IFC in Bahrain and Tunisia are sole owners of their firms at 59% and 55% respectively. This compares with 48% sole owners in Jordan and the UAE and 41% in Lebanon. There is around 280 initiatives being held annually to promote entrepreneurship in Arab countries. In Jordan, the number of female-led startups overall is believed to be close to the global average of 37%. In Egypt, half of the businesses invested in by angel investment groups are run by women. It's worthwhile to note here that the rapid improvements in technology, infrastructure, And the widespread use of technology for life, for business, for education, has additionally opened windows of opportunity for women entrepreneurs in the dynamic and fast-growing tech sector. The Internet's work anywhere capability has created the perfect conditions for flourishing female talent in the MENA. Sectors in which we are seeing female entrepreneurs thriving in tech include digital marketing, advertising, games, education, technology platforms, e-commerce, fashion retail, and publishing. 1 in 3 tech startups in the Arab world are run by women, significantly higher than in Silicon Valley. 35% of internet entrepreneurs in the Arab world are women, and with numbers of internet users in the region rapidly rising, this represents a remarkable opportunity and a market that is wide open for women entrepreneurs. So what are the barriers and challenges that women entrepreneurs are facing, and what can be done to address them? We all acknowledge that the lifeline for entrepreneurship is access to finance. One of the most critical barriers to women's entrepreneurship in the MENA region is the difficulty to accessing startup capital and financing due to lack of capital and assets and limited financial literacy. Financial inclusion and literacy for women is not just a MENA problem, but a universal challenge to women's entrepreneurship and broader economic participation. More than 70% of female-led small and medium enterprises across every region are either unserved or underserved financially, according to the IFC. In the MENA, where some countries pre-pandemic are still recovering from civil war, political conflict, and serious economic instability, improving financial literacy and access to finance is of critical importance to lift the region's most underprivileged and the marginalized millions of women and youth from poverty. We all acknowledge that financial inclusion facilitates job creation, stimulates investment, supports economic growth, alleviates poverty, and empowers female agency. Women face, as we mentioned, additional gender-specific constraints in accessing credit because they lack sufficient collateral security to meet the lending requirements. Women's access to finance is further complicated by the fact that they have fewer opportunities in the region for paid employment in the labor market and thus for making savings. It is therefore unsurprising that women represent around 62% of microfinance clients in the MENA, according to the OECD. Microfinancing programs, such as those extended by the SANAD Fund for the last 10 years, offer trusted, targeted products for women entrepreneurs when there is limited interest from commercial banks and other financial lending institutions. Recently, I am very pleased to share, as my colleague Mayada mentioned, there are positive signs that women-founded businesses are increasingly of interest to venture capital firms, impact investors, angel investors, keen to capitalize on the untapped talent, knowledge, and potential of the region's women business owners. Looking ahead, what has changed in our economy, and why is there more interest now in availing microfinance? COVID-19 has greatly exacerbated social and economic tensions that have become increasingly entrenched for decades, plunging millions into poverty and joblessness. It has deepened pre-existing inequalities. Lockdown restrictions have greatly disrupted economic activity in the MENA, with UNICEF reporting that the equivalent of 11 million full-time jobs were lost in the MENA region as a result of COVID pandemic. The poverty rate for women, which was expected to decrease by 2.7% between 2019 and 2021, is now estimated to increase by 9.1% due to the pandemic and its fallout, according to the UN. Arab women employed in the sectors that have been hardest hit by the pandemic include retail, hospitality, care work, and other service-based or low-skilled sectors have been most vulnerable to job losses and economic instability. Millions of women in the region have been left in poverty and serious underemployment. COVID-19 has had a disproportionate impact on female entrepreneurship, especially on women-owned micro-enterprises in the low and middle-income countries in the MENA. Millions of microfinance borrowers and other small business owners have found themselves unable to repay the loans and are struggling to pay business debts. Amid this repayment crisis, what is needed, as advocated by the Financial Times in a recent report, is a space for microfinance borrowers to breathe and recover, room to rethink and pivot where necessary while the economy returns to pre-pandemic levels. In the MENA, this could almost certainly be achieved through special programs supported by philanthropists, by impact investors, by angel investors. SANAD promptly responded to the COVID-19 crisis by launching, through the Technical Assistance Facility, a new response program that combines SANAD debt financing with a grant component to help entrepreneurs digitize and therefore protect their businesses. Digitization is the future of women-owned enterprise in the MENA. As the World Bank's State of the Mashriq Women report noted, and I quote, "There are significant opportunities for women in entrepreneurship and the digital economy, with an increasing number of digital jobs created as technology transforms almost all economic sectors." To conclude, with all the distinguished guests and my fellow guest speaker, the gender dimension of the COVID-19 crisis and its disproportionate impact on women highlights the uneven progress made toward gender equality in recent decades, not only in the MENA, but globally. Unless action is taken to address the crisis of poverty and the injustice of economic exclusion and gender discrimination in the region, we will see serious implications in the year ahead for the well-being, social mobility, and mental health of whole families and communities, and for the economic prosperity and stability of the region overall. This is why microfinance is so important. The key to empowering, engaging, and including women in the MENA is empowering entrepreneurship, strengthening women's voices and leadership, and building on positive momentum and accelerating women's equality to enhance economic growth. The Arab International Women's Forum has been on this journey with women in the MENA for the last 20 years. And although we all acknowledge that there is still a long way to go, yet we are proud that Arab women have laid down important groundwork to empower and enable the next generation of women leaders in the region. It's now up to regional governments, private sector, international donors, and women entrepreneurs themselves to come together in partnership and work together to create that facilitating and stable environment for entrepreneurship. The price of doing nothing is simply too great. Women are the MENA's most precious asset. The inclusion of women is absolutely essential in securing economic stability and sustainability, private sector growth, and the social mobility, and above all, the equality of opportunity that is truly the key to a peaceful and prosperous MENA future for all its citizens. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Haifa, for this inspiring speech and for this wonderful contribution. I would address the first question directly to you and continue with the topic of what we can do, and particularly what can we each do as participants in an institution to move that institution on gender. So specifically, what can we do, what can our partners do to advance the topic of gender in their institutions?
It is extremely important to acknowledge the role of women and in your institutions, in all institutions in the region. Women are proving themselves, and women are really taking lead roles in the region and inspiring. What is important is to give them that opportunity, that chance, that equal opportunity in all institutions and in all really, whether private or public sector institutions. We need more training. It's very important to acknowledge that there is training that is required to be able to learn the new methods of working, learn the new technologies, and learn. We have been all thrown in the future of work thanks to the pandemic, with the advance of technology, and for all of us having to use more technology. So women still need to be more trained in learning the new systems, as well as women need to be supported in going up also through the ladders in all the institutions, not just only to enter the door, but there has to be free access and open access for women to climb the ladder and prove themselves within the organizations and institutions where they work.
Thank you. A reminder to our participants today to do enter your questions on Slido and vote questions up that you favor. I would address a question to Mayada, particularly on to connect with what was said about fintech. You had mentioned the potential for microfinance institutions to leverage fintech. The question came through which channels you would suggest to promote the connection between MSMEs and innovative fintechs or other digital service providers.
So to connect MFIs and fintechs, that's the question? Yes, yeah. I mean, I definitely think that there's a role for institutions like SANAD to play here. And I think that more needs to be done to broker these relationships. On their own, it's difficult. I have to say some of the examples that I gave in my talk, I know some of the behind the scenes conversations that have happened, and they've not been easy. They're not easy. You have very different power dynamics. You have very different cultures between kind of young, new startups versus established institutions. So there's a lot of work that needs to happen to broker and bring these parties together. So fintechs have very thin margins. They don't have a lot of understanding of the segments that the MFIs serve. So there needs to be patience in these relationships. And so institutions like SANAD can actually play a role in helping to mitigate the risks of these relationships. A lot of MFIs may not want to, I mean, it takes a lot of effort to broker a partnership, to learn even the technology that is being presented, to differentiate between the different providers that they might want to partner with. And so there's a role for donors, there's a role for investors, impact investors, to actually play that brokering role and to help mitigate some of the risks that are involved for the fintech as well as for the FSP that is trying to establish that relationship.
Thank you. Thank you. It is something that we've seen, of course, over time is that, while there can be a great deal of interest in finding these partnerships, it can be very challenging to meet a match, so to speak, much perhaps as in dating. We'll go to the top question now on Slido, which is to Haifa, and I'll just read it out. As president of the Arab International Women's Forum, you must have come across some very interesting examples of women in business that have really inspired you, and from which you think we can all take an example. Would you have any names or a description of why those people have inspired you?
Thank you. Indeed, I have come across the last 20 years across many outstanding women leaders in business leaders in the Arab world, in the MENA region, as well as women in the political life and in civil society. Allow me to share two examples of two outstanding women leaders in business that have inspired me tremendously and who I have met in the very early days of AIWF and continue to work with them and to admire them. The first is Widad Bouchamawi. She is from Tunisia. Wadad is in the family business. She has been working in the family business, which is very much focused on textiles and energy, but above all, since 2011, she has taken over the lead of the Confederation of Tunisian Industry, Trade and Handicrafts. And she is still leading that very important confederation of business in Tunisia. Importantly, as leader of that confederation, she became a member of the National Dialogue Quartet in Tunisia in 2013 at a very critical time for her country. And 2015, we are well aware that that quartet won the Nobel Peace Prize. So you have here an outstanding first-class example of a tremendous young woman leader engaged in business, engaged in pushing not only in her family business, engaged in pushing the Tunisian private sector in her role as head of the Confederation, and then entering into dialogue to build the grounds for peace and security in her country, which is essential, again, for the benefit of all Tunisian people. And truly and rightly so, that merited as part of the quartet winning the Nobel Peace Prize. A second example, I will only share two, although I can give many more. The second example that I find outstandingly impressive is Dr. Raja Al-Ghurq from the United Arab Emirates. Dr. Raja Al-Ghurq is also in family business. She has taken over the lead of one of the largest family businesses in the UAE and in the region. Not only that, and become managing director and very successful and has been mentioned all the time in the Forbes top Arab businesswomen lists, but she has set up the Dubai Businesswomen Council at the Dubai Chamber of Commerce to help other women also join business and train, and training courses and inspire each other. There's a lot happening at the Dubai Businesswomen Council, of which she is the president, of which she inspired. So she's empowering other women in business in the UAE in that regard. On the regional front, as head of the Foundation Al-Ghurq, she has been involved in empowering youth and education in the MENA region through the Foundation of Al-Ghurq. So, outstanding contributions apart from being very successful as leading the family business. Inspiring indeed.
Inspiring examples of, absolutely. And Wadad, we have seen her speak at some of the events we've sponsored, an incredible speaker as well. I'd like to ask a question that connects both presentations a little bit, and that has to do with the effects. Mayada, you went into this a little bit, but the effects of the pandemic on female clients of microfinance. I wonder if you could say a little bit more about what I think in the samples between the different MFIs, there was quite a diversity of male and female clients as part of that sample. Perhaps was that maybe related to the structure of the MFI's clientele? And did you see differences between those? And I wonder for Haifa if you see what effects you see among the businesses that you are familiar with that are led by women. Do you see differences there in terms of the effects of COVID on those businesses?
Yeah, no, it's an excellent question, and yes. So the sample represents essentially the customers of the MFIs and the FSPs we partnered with. So in the Indonesia case, we worked with an MFI called Bina Artha, which is very dominantly, focuses on women clients, very small group lending, versus some of the other MFIs we partnered with, which have, mixed or equal, kind of more equally spread customers. So there's not one story across the four markets on this gender issue, which is really interesting in and of itself. It is very specific to the country. So in Indonesia, women businesses outperformed male-run businesses, which is very interesting finding. Whereas in a country like Colombia, male businesses outperformed women-owned businesses. In some cases, some of the difference was less in the revenue side of the business. It had to do with more of other issues, for example, like covering some of the expenses. So it's not a consistent story. And there's a lot of factors that are happening in each of the individual countries that actually play a role in this. So, for example, just has to do with just the pandemic, how the pandemic has rolled out in some of these countries. In the case of Colombia, you've actually, in addition to the pandemic, you've had a lot of political instability. So that has affected what's been happening with micro and small enterprises in those countries. So it really has been different. In a place like Nigeria, both men and women's businesses have been able to rebound very quickly and at the same level. So it's really specific. So I don't know exactly what the MENA story has been on this, and Haifa, I'm sure will have more to say about that.
Thank you. I already mentioned about it in my remarks. Indeed, women's businesses have suffered because of the pandemic the most in the MENA region, and the levels of poverty for women has increased. Women's responsibilities have increased at home, as well as with the education of the children during lockdown, as well as with less earnings. The challenges that they have faced has been tremendous. There was recently a report by McKinsey that speaks about women being burnt out because of the pressures of the pandemic, and certainly women in the MENA region, especially across, but also I will highlight women in the rural areas have been very badly hit with the pandemic, with less revenue and more responsibilities. And so it has been, it had very adverse effects, but at the same time, there has been more awareness, as we said, that we need to build back better, we need to move forward. Governments, private sector, multinational donors, multinational organizations like SANAD are all coming to the region to look at who they can help first and how they can help to alleviate the poverty and help especially women and youth overcome the challenges that were compounded during the pandemic. So I believe through collaboration between all parties, governments, private sector, more awareness and more funding coming in to help women in business in the region who have been badly impacted to build back their businesses, opening markets for them. That will be very important.
Haifa, you've given the perfect transition to one of the other questions that has been put into Slido, and that is, we do have a number of participants from donor agencies and from the impact investing sphere. What advice would you have to them on how they can effectively advance female entrepreneurship?
I would strongly recommend that when they visit the region and start to talk with governments and or with the chambers of commerce and all these federations of business, which are mainly male dominated, to put women's agenda on the table. And really, often to, if I may add, in advocating reforms and in availing funds, there has to be a gender dimension and a gender requirement put on the table, because this is the only way to alleviate our communities, our societies from poverty and opening opportunities to build back better in the future. We cannot continue to ignore that 50% of the population in all aspects, and importantly in the business sector and in entrepreneurship. This is absolutely key. So they are welcome to come. They are welcome to look at what is happening on the ground. Each country has its different set of problems and opportunities. Always are opportunities, but it's important to put the gender dimension on the table at the outset.
Thank you. Thank you. There's a question from Mayada here, and that is how you explain the conclusion in your research, but beyond that, what reasons would you point to why the MENA region has been less impacted by COVID?
It's a very important question. And I think some of it has to do with, actually we've been pondering this just globally, because there are certain countries in Africa that have also been less impacted. And there's some kind of health reasons or demographic reasons that some people put out. Younger populations, less prone to, less of disease and other pre-existing conditions that are, for example, obesity is one of the reasons in the United States that people anticipate why the crisis has been more severe here. So that's on one level, which is the pandemic itself. On another level, a lot of the countries in the region while they did have closures, they were much more limited than in some other regions of the world where the closures were pretty severe. And so the governments did allow businesses to continue in whatever way they could. So that's one explanation as well. Another has to do with some of the policy responses that the region has taken. We've seen in other regions of the world, the policy responses have been actually they intended to be helpful, but actually ended up hurting micro and small enterprises inadvertently. And for example, we interviewed many of the regulators in Egypt, where we saw that initially some of the moratoria that was instituted there was misperceived by the MFIs, and then they quickly clarified and communicated correctly that MFIs could continue to collect and could continue to lend, which allowed these businesses to continue to participate in and survive. So a lot of these reasons can partly explain. I mean, I have not done a specific study on the region and precisely why it has weathered the storm better. But I think it's a combination of many of these factors that come together.
Haifa, would you have a supposition there? Would you have a thesis on why this would be the case?
I think what Mayada said is all absolutely true. I will add also that we have a very healthy diet. They call it the Mediterranean diet. This is what we live on in the region. Even in the rural areas where you have levels of poverty, they still eat lentils and they eat things that they produce on the ground, fresh. And so there is no processed food as such. They can't probably afford it even. So they eat fresh things. And I think probably this helps to build your immunity.
I have to just say, can I just jump in? This is exactly what I heard when I was in Egypt myself not that long ago. And that was the theory that I heard most prevalent, is that the diet is the reason.
Since it's a diet that everybody seems to want to copy, I think we should support it. There's another question on the potential for digitalization at the MSME level. So among the clients of our partner institutions, how do you assess how ready the MSMEs are for digitalization? It's an essential factor, of course, in their potential to respond to and recover from the pandemic, especially as with the potential of further hybrids of the virus and further waves of sickness. So how do you evaluate the ability of the end clientele to engage in the digitalization process?
Should I? Oh, go ahead, Haifa, please.
Thank you. I recently, in answering this question, comes to mind a recent hackathon I was invited to attend, which was hosted by the World Bank on agri-tech in Lebanon. And I was one of the judges who really had to go through the list of outstanding young SMEs, all competing, bringing forward their agri-tech business solutions. Some of them were only women groups. Some of them were young men and young women. We were very impressed, all of us, by the level of technology that they had mastered, how savvy they were, how market savvy they were. These are young people, and this is their time, and this is their days. And the technology for them is not difficult to master. On the contrary. And so we were very, very impressed with all the proposals put on the table, and we chose, of course, we had to have one winner or two, and then second and third. But honestly and truly, it was one of the most heartwarming and enlightening, encounter with young SMEs, business leaders in tech. And I believe something like this will be will give us hope for the future and for the region.
Yeah, I would add to that I would start with the business owner themselves. You know, where are they? So I agree with Haifa that if it's a younger business owner, yes, they're going to probably be more digitally savvy. Yes, they're going to be more ready to make those shifts. However, if it's someone who's older, their digital readiness may not be, or their digital adoption may not be as easy, and they may need more technical assistance or support on that transformation. The other dimension is really their customers. Who are they serving? So you notice that merchants or firms that adopt digital sales or digital payments, they often do so when their customers demand it. And so that's another issue. So if the business itself is serving kind of a young, savvy segment, then very highly likely that merchant or that business is going to want to also make that shift because their customers are going to demand it. If it's a more traditional business where their clientele are not going to have the ability to do digital payments, then that's going to take much more effort. So you're looking to both digitize their customers as well as them as a business. And then the other dimension that I think is very, very important, it has to do with the ecosystem in the particular village or town, city, wherever they are. So if you're talking about a very remote rural area where internet coverage, mobile coverage, the infrastructure is not there, it's going to be a much longer journey than if they are in a city where there is, the digital ecosystem is already available. People make the transition when their lives become easier as a result, not more difficult. No one wants to travel in order to do a digital transaction, right? Like that reduces the value of that. So all of those factors matter. Some of the techniques that we've been seeing that facilitate some of these issues are, for example, as Haifa mentioned, in the ag space, when the value chain starts to digitize, when the buyer is supporting that process, when the buyers, sellers, producers, et cetera, everyone in the value chain, that's when you start to see digital adoption.
Excellent. A final question. I think this has been very, very interesting, and I would love to continue. I think we will have to move on, but a final question prior, and that is what predictions each of you have for the ability of micro, small, medium enterprises to come out of the pandemic. Mayada, you talked about some of the quick responses or quick recoveries you've seen. And what do you have any expectations for the rate of failures among these businesses?
Yeah, this is we've been talking about this. Because we are seeing this division that's happening with some firms being able to adopt to the digital economy, let's call it, very rapidly, and they're really thriving, and they've grown exponentially during the pandemic, and I anticipate that they will continue. But there are certain businesses that are not, and what I am hoping is not that they fail, is that the international community, governments, nonprofits, other actors actually help them make this transition. And it may require some adaptation to the businesses. Some businesses, for example, services industries are likely to continue because there will always be demand for hair salons and cafes, right? Like that is, and your digital adoption there may not necessarily be the thing that's going to make or break you. However, other really small merchants that are just in the trade, just in basic trades, those are really susceptible to being eliminated with e-commerce giants or e-commerce, even small merchants that can do home delivery and are just more convenient for people. And so we have to think about these trade businesses and how do we help them? What more can we do to help these businesses adapt and thrive in the next phase?
Thank you very much. Haifa, would you have anything you would like to add to that? Would you have a contribution there?
Thank you. What I would like to add is that the pandemic has accentuated the need for economic recovery, for an active private sector role in that economic recovery, working with governments, of course, and the multinational community. But it's a private sector that is made of small and medium businesses, micro businesses, all the way to the big family businesses. We all have to come together. And it's a private sector that is driven by businessmen and businesswomen working together hand in hand. This is the only way we can see economic recovery, prosperity, and a better future for the region and its people.
Thank you. What an excellent conclusion, and our warmest thanks and our deep gratitude to you both for having joined us today for this and for your very interesting contributions and indeed inspiring. So more to follow, I'm sure, from both of you, and we'll be watching and listening. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
We will move on to a contribution from a number of our partners. This being the midst of the pandemic, then of course we would very much love to have some of our partners, some of you with us in the room to contribute and say a few words and engage in conversation with us and indeed have a cup of coffee together or a cup of tea. Unfortunately, of course, we can't do that. Nonetheless, we are graced by excellent partners and have a contribution from a few of them who have gotten ready, who have contributed videos. Now, before we go to those videos, I did want to mention that much of the information that we have gone over today is in our 2020 impact report, and we are happy to share with you the link to that. It is ir2020.sanad.lu. You should see it on the screen, and you can go there. I know there was one question we didn't get to about local currency lending. The information responding to that question is available on the microsite at that link. So now to move forward then, we will move forward with a few words from a number of partners of the SANAD Fund from around the region.
I'm Anwar Jayousi, the General Manager of Fahoum, Palestine for Credit and Development. We are, thanks to God, the biggest microfinance institution in Palestine. We have 38 branches. We've been dispersing around 200,000 loans from the date of start in 1999. Around more than 500 million US dollar. We have now around 300 employees. Fahoum has become one of the main pillar and player in the microfinance sector industry in Palestine. We start working with SANAD from 2013. From that date till now, we got around 20 million USD from SANAD. What really special about our relation with SANAD, we consider it as a partnership for us because we always feel that SANAD always give us an added value. Whenever we ask them for technical assistance, they are the first people to jump and provide Fahoum what it needs. What also really I'm pleased about SANAD, that SANAD in all time of a crisis, 2016, 2014, 2020, always SANAD, the first people to jump and stand with Fahoum. And always they're asking us whether we need any help. We consider SANAD is a crucial and the most important partner working for us. Really, we are congratulating them for their 10th anniversary, and we are ready to cooperate in the future in order to transform Fahoum to a specialized bank.
Hello guys, my name is Martin. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Skygang. Hello everyone, my name is James Moy. I am the CTO and co-founder of SkyGarden.
SkyGarden is an e-commerce platform providing some awesome growth tools for the small and medium-sized enterprises in sub-Saharan Africa. We are operating out of Nairobi, Kenya, and with the recent Series A raise with the SANAD fund, we're now employing 35 people out of our offices here in Nairobi.
Yep. So we built technology to empower small businesses to be able to make more money from them. These are small businesses that they already sell offline, they have brick and mortar shops, and we provide them with a web shop solution where they can be able to manage the inventory, be able to get more customers online. We help them with logistics such as payments, shipping, and we've seen quite a big uptick of our merchant products here in Nairobi.
Yeah, so we right now support around 7,500 active smaller merchants on the platform. We've onboarded 3 or 4 times the range, and of course one of the prime focuses now with the partnership with the SANAD Fund is really to keep on empowering these smaller guys. We closed our Series A round in June. We've been through a long and very learningful process with SANAD. Yeah, and we've already built the first project with the technical assistance facility. Of course, looking to build a lot of other great projects with the facility.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Hi, my name is Nermin Altari, and I currently sit on the advisory board of the European Mediterranean Economists Association in Barcelona, Spain. And I also am on the board of trustees of the Nile University and the board of directors of Fahoum Consumer Finance in Cairo, Egypt. However, my relationship with SANAD started when I was at the Central Bank of Egypt, sub-governor, responsible for banking reform, which mainly entails that I was responsible for setting up the MSMEs financing sector within the banking industry, also responsible for the transformation of the underperforming public banks and introducing innovative financing mechanisms and approaches in order to enhance financial inclusion and assist in bettering women empowerment. I worked with SANAD as a partner on multiple projects, all extremely diverse, and every single time they actually proved that they were a responsible, understanding, and a true partner. So I think the most valuable for me was the German Arab Women Leadership Summit that I attended with Finance in Motion and SANAD because it really enabled me to understand how we can enhance women partnerships and leaders within the industry. Overall, it was an amazing experience. The team is extremely professional, very understanding, very supportive, really a partner. Thank you.
Happy birthday, SANAD. This is Gamal Khalifa. I'm former head of microfinance with the Egyptian Financial Regulatory Authority and currently head of institutional upgrade project with the Egyptian Federation of Microfinance, a project sponsored by the Central Bank of Egypt. I happen to know SANAD since 2014. Right before the microfinance law was issued, SANAD was always in contact with us, always exploring opportunities, also looking for ways to help and to be engaged in the developments in the market. As soon as the law was issued, microfinance was one of the activities where SANAD has created an entity with other partners in microfinance. Definitely SANAD has proven to me the right word. SANAD in Egyptian is support, and actually the team has proven this very clearly. and I would like to wish you all the success. They have really shown activity in all aspects. Again, I would like to wish you all the best and happy anniversary. Thank you very much.
We thank Anwar Jayosi, Martin Mylund and James Moai, Ms. Nermin El-Tari and Mr. Gamal Khalifa for these generous words and the congratulations on our birthday. In speaking of such strong partners as these, an effort such as the SANAD Fund is not possible without them throughout, from top to bottom. And so we would like to take this opportunity to thank all of our partners and all of you who join us today, from our donors and investors across the board, from the many people at KfW that have supported the fund over the years, for all of the people at Impact and Citibank and Finance in Motion that have contributed to the fund, and to our many partner institutions and service providers around the world, indeed, who have made SANAD a success over the years. Equally, a special thanks goes to the managing directors of Finance in Motion, Elvira Lefting, Sylvia Wisniewski, Christoph Freitag, as well as Klaus Maurer and Florian Meister, who contributed to the fund over the years. And finally, a special thanks to Tech Quartier for hosting us today and making all of this possible. We've said a great deal about the fund today, all of it heartfelt, of course, and yet the fund is about tomorrow. And it is about a better tomorrow. It is about supporting the small businesses throughout the Middle East, North Africa, and Sub-Saharan Africa to a better future and to more economic growth. And so let us bind together and continue this partnership to the better future of the fund and to our common success. Thank you for joining us today, and we wish you a pleasant evening. Goodbye.